The real problem in America is that the media covered up for President Obama in 2008, because without that, President Obama is not president. The real problem in America is the media will cover up for anyone. Hillary Clinton, how could Hillary Clinton possibly be running for president in 2016? How is that even a possibility? She is the only first lady in American history to be fingerprinted by the FBI. She's the only first lady in history to be interviewed by the FBI. Hillary Clinton is a wildly corrupt, nasty, and uncharismatic politician. And yet she's been made out to be the greatest politician since JFK, who also was media created, because JFK was the greatest politician since Lincoln. The attempt to target folks in politics is a mistake. We need to be tearing down the entire media infrastructure one brick at a time. It's what we've been focusing on at Truth Revolt, by going after members of the media, by making their lives a living hell. That's the goal. They should be miserable. They're miserable humans. And we have no problem saying that and going after them. So picking the targets is very important. And how we go after targets, how we go after people is also very important. And there's two important points to be made about that when we go after people. The first is, we need to stop thinking as conservatives that there is some independent voter out there that we need to swing to our side. And that if we just moderate our language and moderate our policies, that we'll win that independent voter. Mitt Romney won independents 54-37, and he lost the election in a walk. That's because the base is what wins elections. I know this is counter to everything that you'll hear from Frank Luntz and everything that you'll hear from Kat Cadell and the rest of that crowd. They're wrong. They're just wrong. We are now in a country where there are 5 independents left. Only 3 of them vote. And the base turnout is what matters. Barack Obama won Ohio simply because the black population in Ohio, which voted virtually 100% for Barack Obama, they represent 12% of the population of Ohio. They were 15% of the electorate. Barack Obama won within that 3% differential. He won Ohio specifically based on voter turnout of his base, because he had a list and he worked it. That's the other thing we're trying to do at Truth Revolt, is create a list of conservatives, allies. And that's why when we ask people to sign up on our website, it's not merely because we want to fundraise from them, although of course we do, but because we actually want to activate them and use them to go after folks who need to be gone after. That's why we have a special ops group that's 1,000 people long that spend 5 minutes a day just harassing people in the media and bothering them until they apologize for things. Because we need to get them to back down and make them think twice before doing nasty things and lying about the state of the world. We also need to reach out to audiences, not independents, but audiences that have not been engaged at all. You know, the independents are the people who are too wishy-washy to make up their mind. There's a whole group of people who just don't even think about politics at all. Those people we can reach out to, and there we need to do something different. And that is, whether you're Heritage Foundation or whether you're us, or whether you're any of the other various 501c3 groups that are doing this, we have a generalized problem in that we are disconnected from the group of people. Because we're so connected to politics and we care so much about it, we don't understand the group of people who are not. And those people do show up every 4 years to vote. And so what we're constantly trying to do, and the first question that I usually get asked is, how do we engage young people? Right? Because I'm 30, that means I'm young, at least in conservative crowds, even though I'm now a member of the older generation in young crowds. I mean, I have a child, so that means I'm a member of the older generation. The question of how to engage young people, which you get so often in conservative crowds, is because the truth is that conservatives despise young people. They think that they're ignorant, they think that they're stupid, and they think that they listen to Top 40 all day, and they smoke pot in their parents' basement, and play video games, and don't pay attention to their schoolwork, and watch bad TV shows that we don't understand, and listen to Katy Perry. And they're right. This is all stuff that young people do. The difference between the right and the left on this is that the right then says, how do we get those people? How do we get those people to read Edmund Burke? And the left says, hey, wait a second, those people listen to Katy Perry, right? Why don't you just go hire Katy Perry to do a concert, and then have Barack Obama get on stage for 30 seconds and talk about socialism, and then walk off, and then we'll do 3 more songs, we'll finish the set, and then they can all go home. Which do you think is more effective in gaining young people? Trying to convince young people to read an author who died 175 years ago? Or maybe it's slightly more effective to actually go where the young people are. And you see this in the way that conservatives fund projects. Now, one of the projects that we've been doing over at Truth Revolt is, and it's probably our most successful project, is our video project. These are all 3 to 5 minute YouTube videos. Each one of them is getting over 100,000 hits right now. They're informational videos. And one of the people who we have doing these videos is Andrew Clavin. I don't know how many of you have seen Andrew's videos. Drew's terrific. And Drew's videos are all humor-based. Drew is, and we want to make him into, the Stephen Colbert of the right. Right? Because that's what we need. Young people actually watch Colbert. Young people actually watch Stewart. Young people have never seen Megyn Kelly. The average age of a Fox News viewer is in their 50s. White male 50s. That is the average age of a Fox News viewer. The average age of the Jon Stewart viewer is 30s. And it's pretty evenly split male and female. It's very heavily skewed liberal, but it's pretty evenly split. We need to be appealing to that group through things that they actually like. It turns out that instead of forcing people to eat their vegetables, what we really should do is we should feed them a lot of chocolate and just mix in. It's like a naked juice. So you mix in the spinach below the taste of the fruit. Right? The whole idea here is to disguise the healthy content as unhealthy content, and the left does this so beautifully. I'm sure if you have kids and grandkids, I'm sure they all visit the website BuzzFeed. How many of you have ever seen BuzzFeed? I'm sure all of them visit the website BuzzFeed. All of my sisters who are conservative, one in particular who's 21 and conservative, she visits BuzzFeed all the time. And the political content on BuzzFeed is wildly left. But that's because they're very smart. What they do is they'll do something like, this is just an example, they'll have an article that says 10 sexiest bisexuals in Hollywood, which is a bunch of beautiful women, right? And then right next to it, it'll say, the Pope comes out against gay marriage. Right, now this is very clever. First of all, the Pope coming out against gay marriage should not be a headline. Turns out that's sort of been their stance on the issue for the last couple thousand years. But what they do by doing that is they imply that the Pope is a bad guy because he doesn't like these 10 bisexual women in Hollywood. It's very brilliant, it's very smart, it's very insidious. Most of the people who read the site will never click on the article about the Pope, but they'll see the headline because it's placed next to the headline about Hillary. The left understands this. A spoonful of sugar doesn't make the medicine go down for the left. It is a trunkful of sugar. And yet, here we are, standing here with our Robitussin and saying, why won't you drink this? Just swig it. It'll be good for you. And so we print pamphlets, and so we distribute on our own Facebook pages speeches by Marco Rubio about his father's upbringing in Cuba, and we say, oh, nobody's watching this. You think? Of course nobody's watching this. Of course nobody's watching this. And so it's extremely important that we start to realize where our audience is. In every other area of American life, conservatives actually understand marketing. When it comes to politics, we decide that we don't want to market, we want to preach. And there's a difference between preaching and marketing. So if we want to actually win, then we need to do the following things. We need to build a list, a working, viable list, as long as humanly possible, of allies that we can activate on a moment's notice. This is what Media Matters has done. This is what the Obama campaign did. That's number one. And that you do by producing content and spending money on marketing and going out and buying lists and drilling into those lists. We have to create new types of content that appeal to different types of folks. Heritage white papers are not going to be read by anybody. And you'll pay $50,000 for a Heritage white paper. Heritage does great work, by the way, but Heritage, you pay $50,000 for a white paper that will be read by 5 legislators. And the reality is that aside from those 5 legislators, it won't make a damn bit of difference. Those $50,000 would be much better spent on something that sounds a lot more frivolous. Make 3 videos, spend $25,000 marketing them, and they will each have over 1 million hits. And that's a lot more people than 5. And finally, we need to speak in moral terms throughout all of this. No more talk about efficiency. No more talk about why their policies fail. You know, my friend Jeremy Boring, who's my managing editor over at Truth Revolt, he's also the executive director of Friends of Abe, which is the underground Hollywood conservative organization outed by the New York Times. Jeremy, who's a spectacular guy, he heard, when he first heard Mitt Romney speak, he called me. I said, what do you think? He said, we are going to get walloped. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, Romney was talking, and what Romney said, this was the main point of his speech, is he said, no society in history, no civilization in history has ever had a growing economy with a marginal tax rate, a top marginal tax rate above 35%. If we can just lower that top marginal tax rate down to 34.23%, then we'll have a growing economy again. And this was the part of the speech Romney was most fascinated with and enthusiastic about. I said, we are so screwed. And of course we were. Because it turns out that while Mitt Romney was talking about top marginal tax rates, Barack Obama and Joe Biden were talking about how Mitt Romney wanted to put y'all back in chains, wanted to put dogs on the top of his cars, wanted to forcibly cut the hair of gay kids back in the 1950s, and wanted to harm as many people as humanly possible, including a former employee who he fired specifically so that later his wife would die of cancer. Right? That was specifically the idea. So who do you think is going to win that battle? So we need to get back to the baseline morality. We are right, and we're not just right because what we do works. We are right because what we do is fundamentally moral, and what the other side is doing is fundamentally immoral. And as long as we speak in those terms that nobody's heard us talk about, by the way. Nobody talks like this. Which is why it's unique, and this is something that David is unique with. If people hear us talk this way, we can actually win, because the truth is we win about half of the election in this country doing everything wrong. If we started doing things right, can you imagine the impact that we would actually have? They own 99% of the media. What if they own 95% of the media? It would radically shift the entire nature of politics in the country. They spend all their time talking about morality. We spend none of our time talking about morality. What if we did 10% of the time? Then we might actually have a fighting chance. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Okay, I'll try to use as much purple language as possible. In terms of what the world is going to look like, and I'll be as realistic about this as possible, because you gave me a time frame, 5 to 10 years. If we're going to talk 5 to 10 years from now, when my little girl is growing up, and she is the cutest thing that ever lived, and anybody who wants to see pictures can see after. The world. There are a couple things that really frighten me right now. One is that she's going to be living in a world where, and we already do live in a world where political correctness is not only the order of the day but mandatory. Free speech is going to be severely curtailed. We're going to be in a world where to be an openly religious person, and we're religious Jews, so that means that she's going to be a religious Jew with help of God. That she's going to be living in a world where she is looked at as immoral by her friends and colleagues outside the Jewish community for believing the things that she believes. And there's a great quote by de Tocqueville that I don't have in front of me, where he talks about the society that's going to be created by the left eventually, and he talks about how they won't take away your freedom of speech and they won't take away your freedom of religion. Instead, what they will do is they will just ostracize you to the point where you do not feel free. And I think that we're basically there already. So she's going to feel like an outcast, but beyond feelings, we're going to reach the point where if, for example, I send her to a private school that does not teach about same-sex marriage, it won't be accredited. The state will just take away the accreditation and the nonprofit status. That scares me. We're going to be going to a synagogue where it's got nonprofit status. They'll take away the nonprofit status, and then once the nonprofit status is gone, they will attempt to end around Hobby Lobby and say that it's a public accommodation, and therefore it has to accommodate certain things that we don't find morally palatable. I think that with regard to the economy, we're looking at an absolute collapse. We're going to have a double dip. We're headed for it right now. As soon as Obama raises the interest rates, we're in serious trouble. Everybody's wondering, if the economy is so thriving, why hasn't the president raised the interest rates? The reason the president has not raised the interest rates is because the moment that he raises our interest rates, our bonds become worthless. They all get called in, and we have a serious inflation problem on our hands. The inflation actually hits home. In order to keep the inflation, there's monetary inflation and there's real inflation. Right now, the real inflation has not skyrocketed. You're seeing some basic products like meat and milk, but you're not seeing it across the board. You're going to see it across the board when the monetary inflation hits home, and that'll happen when the government has to stop borrowing cash, which is going to happen pretty soon. So the economy is not in good shape. In terms of race relations in the country are about to spiral even further downward, because we had our great unifying black president, and he did anything but unify the country on the issue of race. In fact, he polarized it for his own political gain. We are going to see riots in Ferguson within the next month and a half. So forget 5 years from now. There will be open riots in the streets in Ferguson again within the next month and a half. It'll probably spread to other cities. I'm not talking about apocalyptic or 1960s rioting, but it'll be pretty bad. And every time there is another situation in which a young black man gets killed at the hands of a white police officer, we'll see this more and more. There will be calls on the foreign policy front. This I truly fear, for Israel to be absolutely cast aside, cut loose. We're already seeing it. The President of the United States has done as much of that as is politically possible for him to do. I think that it's going to continue. I think that when it comes to fighting terrorism overseas, we have slashed the military in a way that is almost irrevocable. We would have to build up so quickly at this point to get back to where we were before Obama came into office. It's going to take us 10 years to do it. We currently have no capacity to fight 2 wars at the same time, which was the open goal of the Pentagon. And by the way, we will have to fight 2 wars, or at least 2 fronts at the same time. It's almost impossible to think of a war where we would not have to fight 2 fronts at the same time. I mean, let's face this reality. Right now, ISIS is winning. Okay, ISIS is a let's not pretend that ISIS is a highly professional group of soldiers. ISIS is a ragtag bunch. It was 5,000 people. 5,000 people took over half of Iraq. Okay, it took us hundreds of thousands of troops to solidify Iraq in the first place. It took them 5,000 troops to destroy the country. And part of that is because the ideology in Iraq is so screwed up. 78% of Iraqis believe in honor killing still. But part of that is because we pulled out. And then we slashed our military. And the President of the United States has no no interest in escalating our military. So what we're looking at is weakness on every front. And when a country gets weak, things start to get very dangerous for law-abiding citizens. Because then they need cash and they need resources. And we already saw this week that there was a story about the IRS simply seizing assets of people who were placing cash in their accounts below $10,000 on a repeat basis, without any charges being filed. They were just seizing cash out of people's accounts. There's one business that had almost $500,000 seized out of its accounts in cash from the IRS because it was routinely depositing under $10,000. Oh, it looks like terrorism. Really, it's like a shoe manufacturer. Did it look like terrorism to you? And so it's a scary world. It's a scary world.
But then we're seeing Jewish children, Jewish students on campuses across the country that targets of Muslim Brotherhood.
Well,
the Jews, I'm really interested to know, are the Jews going to be comfortable and safe and secure in this country?
Okay.
Jews in France today are leaving.
Yeah, okay.
They're emigrating. 60% of them
Right.
are here.
No, we're seeing Jews flee Europe. There's no question. No, I understand the question. Are Jews going to be safe in this country in 10 years? Yes. Are they going to be safe in this country in 50 years? I have no idea. I have no idea. Maybe 30 years. I don't know. Because when political correctness takes over a country, the Jews don't last long. And what we're watching right now in France is perfect proof of that. It's not the French who are expelling the Jews. It's all the Muslims from North Africa who came to France and took over the country who are expelling the Jews. I mean, they're breaking into synagogues. They're firebombing synagogues over what's happening in Gaza. It's pure anti-Semitism. And that synagogue isn't located in Gaza. It's not even located close to Gaza, it turns out. So yeah, it's scary stuff for sure.
Since you brought up the Jews, okay, I just want to ask you, very often there are people on our side, which I place many of them, who are free market capitalists, for individual liberty, for the things we value. But when you bring up Israel, they'll say we should withdraw aid to Israel as we should to every country. Now, I'd like to hear your answer. My answer, I say that budget, Israel budget, should be under our defense budget.
Well, I mean, it certainly should be under our defense budget. The reality is that Israel should be expending every resource necessary in order to get off that aid, for its own sake, not because of America. By the way, I am actually, as a general matter, not supremely anti the idea of just cutting huge swaths of foreign aid. I mean, the reality is that we're giving a ton of foreign aid to the Palestinians right now. We're giving $400 million a year to the Palestinians, which is a horror show. We just signed $200 million to Hamas the other day. The Israelis should be focused foursquare on getting off of American aid simply so that they can tell an American president like Obama to stick it. Okay, so there are a couple things that you brought up there that I think are worthwhile talking about. The first is that Republicans, conservatives, as a general matter, need to understand incrementalism. The left has understood this for a very long time. It is not necessary for conservatives to come out at the very outset and start saying things like it's time to do away with Social Security, right? Because that's not a popular position. What Republicans and conservatives should be doing, as a general matter, is taking the incremental position. Scott Walker knew he was not going to be able to completely finish public sector unions in Wisconsin, so he was smart where John Kasich was not, and he went after the teachers' unions, which were largely unpopular, as opposed to the police and firefighters, which would have been unpopular. So he went after popular things first. Republicans obviously ought to be doing that, and they should be taking aggressive action on popular measures like that. As far as the minority community and how to appeal to folks in the inner city, this argument has been made with regard to school vouchers, that if we just argue to folks in the inner city that school vouchers are a solution to your public education problem, then they will flock to us in droves. This ignores the fact that we've spent the last 60 years indoctrinating kids in the idea that white America is inherently racist and that conservatives are inherently racist. They are mistrusted. The truth is that and the police are a perfect example of this. The thing that the inner city needs most, the thing that inner city black communities need most, is an active police force. It is the thing that they need more than anything else, because there's more crime in these communities than there is any place else. And yet this is precisely the force that is being rejected by a lot of inner city black communities, or at least large swaths of them, because they've been convinced by a media that thinks that America's a racist, evil place, that officers like Officer Darren Wilson are the bad guys as opposed to the guys who are taking criminals out of commission. And by the way, Michael Brown was a criminal. The autopsy shows he was going for Darren Wilson's gun. He was not just a gentle giant or any of the rest of this nonsense. The only way to fight back in terms of the minority community is not to convince people that you are not a racist. That does not work. It never has. The only way to convince people in the minority community to vote for you is to convince them that your opponent is a racist. And that's something that we ought to be doing on a regular basis. And I don't mean going back to, the foundations of the Democratic Party were in slaveholding, which of course is true, or that the foundations of the Democratic Party were in segregation, which of course is also true. I mean saying that today, the Democrats are a bunch of racists. Because today, the Democrats are a bunch of racists. Today, the Democrats believe that black people are inherently stupider than white people, which is why they cannot obtain voter ID, which is why they should not be allowed to have school vouchers, which is why they need the government to go in and mother them, and all the rest of it. And we need to be saying that often as humanly possible. And we ought to be sending people who, I don't think it should matter black or white who we send, but it would be great to have somebody like Alan West go into the inner cities and talk about this. This would be something worthwhile. Now, that's a long-term vision, because when you spend decades indoctrinating people, you can't break that stranglehold immediately. But we need to start talking about our opposition for what it is. These are not good people with good hearts who are just bad at their jobs. They're bad people with very bad hearts who are very bad at their jobs. Rand is an extraordinarily clever politician. I mean, I know Rand, and Rand is a very, very smart guy. He is not his dad in a couple of different ways. Do I trust him on foreign policy? No. Do I trust him on Israel? Absolutely not. Do I think that he has a draw with a unique crowd? Absolutely. Because he's talking legalization of pot. He's going to young audiences, and he's talking legalization of marijuana, and he's feeding into their notions of victimhood. So he actually is doing this, and this I object to very strongly. The legalization of pot I actually don't care about. I think that that's a stupid issue. Because the government sucks at everything. So they've sucked at marijuana enforcement my entire life. It was easier to get pot on the playground than it was to get a can of beer. I never did it, and I was never interested in it, but there was a pot corner at my Orthodox Jewish day school. People were selling pot. It was not, it's not hard to obtain pot. So put that issue aside. What he is doing, and this is he's going out there and he's doing mea culpas for conservatism. He's now saying, yeah, conservatism does have a history of being racist. Yeah, conservatism does have, but I'm different. And this I object to in a very strong way. As far as his appeal to the base, his appeal to the base is a slightly... On domestic issues, I agree with Rand Paul about 95% of the time. I think that Rand Paul is a consistent libertarian, virtually always. And so that drives people. And by the way, he's not the only one popular with the base. Ted Cruz is very popular with the base. If you look at him in Iowa right now, Cruz is leading Paul. So there are a couple of candidates who are very popular with the base. I definitely understand Rand's appeal. I think he's brilliant. I think he's very smart. I think that what he's doing right now, Rand understands the cardinal rule of politics. And if you take nothing else away from this is the one rule of politics that you need to know. Okay, the one rule of politics is, as Sam Adams put it, take your opponent, put them in the wrong, and keep them there. Right? The idea is that you need to find an issue on which 100% of people agree with you except your opponent. So that's what Rand does so well. It's why his drone filibuster was smarter than Ted's Obamacare filibuster. Because the drone filibuster, it turns out 100% of Americans don't want to get droned in their backyard. 100%. Except for Obama, who refused to say he wouldn't drone you in his backyard. Right? But Ted, Obamacare, unpopular, yes, but not wildly so. That's about a 55-45, 60-40 split. So Rand is smarter. This is what Obama gets. In 2008, he ran on the slogan Hope and Change. 100% of people like Hope and Change, except for John McCain, who's Bush's third term and an old fuddy-duddy. In 2012, he couldn't campaign on his record, so he campaigned on Forward. Everybody likes Forward, except for Mitt Romney, who wants to take you in reverse back to the 1950s, where he can cut gay kids' hair, apparently. So we need to find candidates who are smart like Rand, but with slightly different principles, particularly on foreign policy. Extreme Islamism is not an existential threat to the United States, and let me explain what I mean by that. Extreme Islamism is a threat to the lives of people in the United States. The American people are an existential threat to the United States. Okay, we are wild. If we wanted to, we could flatten these folks. Flatten them. So it's really about us. It ain't about... They're bad guys in every era of human history. The only question is whether we have the balls to go after them.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Okay,
yeah.
People are not alarmed by it.
See, I think people are alarmed when they are told specific stories. I think that what freaked them out about Michelle, and I love Michelle. Michelle's spectacular. What freaked them out about what Michelle was saying is she was taking somebody who, this is a political point, not a factual one. What she was saying may have had factual basis. Politically speaking, Huma Abedin, the idea for the American people that Huma Abedin was, standing behind Hillary Clinton whispering Muslim Brotherhood kind of sweet nothings into her ear, that was a bridge too far. In the same way, by the way, again, that doesn't mean that she's wrong. The American people didn't believe Alger Hiss was whispering communist nothings into FDR's ear either, and he was. So it doesn't mean that she's wrong. It just means that it's a hard sell. And so she took a hit for that because it's a hard sell, and then she didn't have the smoking gun the way that Whittaker Chambers had the smoking gun. People forget there's a long gap between when Alger Hiss was first outed and when Alger Hiss actually got prosecuted. Several years of a gap between the time that Alger Hiss was outed by Whittaker Chambers and company and the time that he was actually prosecuted. We are talking years before the pumpkin patch. And in that time, Whittaker Chambers went from a very well-respected editor at a top-level publication to literally nothing. I mean, he was castigated, thrown out, and it was only when he had actual documentation with Alger Hiss's name on it, basically, that they were able to prosecute Alger Hiss, and suddenly he was resurgent. That was the problem for Michelle, is that the smoking gun never really emerged. And so what she was saying could have been true, but it wasn't enough for people to buy into. And so if you want to scare people about radical Islam, all you really have to do is tell the truth about what just happened in New York City last week. I mean, say a guy just got axed in the back of the head by a radical Muslim. I don't think the American people, by the way, are convinced by any of this stuff. Bill Maher's on our side now. Bill Maher's a pretty good bellwether for the American left. I think that even a lot of the folks on the left are beginning to realize that Islamism is a very scary thing. The only question is, in the words of Sean Connery and the Untouchables, what are you willing to do? And I don't think that they're willing to do much. And clearly Obama is not. I think the American people are willing to do more than Obama is, though. Obama clearly wants to do nothing. You need to find a different audience. Really, the whole point is this. One of the biggest questions for folks who are conservative is how do you know when to debate? This is, I think, maybe one of the biggest questions. We all want to go on our Facebook pages or talk with our friends at the country club or down at the PTA meetings about politics. You have to know when it's worthwhile and when it isn't. Okay, here's when it's worthwhile, okay? Number one, you found the one honest liberal in America who actually is open-minded and wants to discuss. Because there's only one of them, and you probably don't know them. Okay, the second is if they're serving you your food and your only options are talk politics or they're going to spit in it. Or the third option is you have them in front of a large group of people. And if you have them in front of a large group of people, your purpose is not to convince them. Your purpose is to humiliate them as badly as possible in front of as many people as possible. Show everybody else, because then your audience is not the person you're arguing with. Your audience is all the people in the audience. And you have to convince all the people in the audience the person you're facing is ignorant, stupid, and morally bigoted. That's the goal. One more.
We got time for one more.
Okay, so here's what we need to do. A deep dig on everybody who is on our site who wants to do something. Not everybody, there's no male-fit bride for conservatives. This idea that everybody needs to be doing the same thing. If I said to everybody, okay, tonight, we're all jazzed about this, we're all going to go phone bank. 0 of us would phone bank tonight. Okay, because we're not the phone banking types. Right, if I said to you, go out and sign a check, I guess half you would sign a check, 3/4 you would sign a check. Right? Find the things that motivate you and get involved in the areas that motivate you. The problem is that people are so despairing that they think, well, I can't change the world just by signing a check. You're right, we can't change the world massively by signing a check, but if huge numbers of us sign checks to the right people, then yeah, we can actually change things. Just don't sign them to Karl Rove, for the love of God. Right? I mean, this is so in other words, find what it is that motivates you. Find what it is that you are good at doing. If you are somebody who wants to knock on doors, find a way to knock on doors. If you're somebody who wants to, and this is one of the things that we've tried to do at Truth Revolt, is we've tried to make it as not burdensome as possible. If you sign up for our special ops list, then we try and send you something to do every day that's supposed to take you 5 minutes or less. So when the Klinghoffer thing was happening, we were the ones who got the ball rolling on the Klinghoffer thing. Our first order of business is we sent out an email to our 1,000 people, and we said, we're all going to call the head of the Met Opera today. And we're going to register our displeasure about the syndication of this. So the one material thing that actually was done is we shut down the syndication of the death of Klinghoffer all over the country. So there are all these protests outside and whatever. We didn't have enough people in New York that we wanted to make a big hullabaloo about that because there were other groups that were doing that. What we did is we were working behind the scenes to push as hard as we could to get it not syndicated. So at least it didn't appear in 50 to 75 cities, which was the original plan. They were originally going to show it on movie screens all across the country. So if you want to join the list, join the list. If you don't want to join our list, join another list. If you're not going to give to us, give to somebody else. But find the people you think are doing the best possible work and find the way that you can back them and back them. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as a movement is telling people to do things that they don't actually want to do. And then they don't do them. Then we're surprised when they don't do them. Turns out it's easier to get a bunch of Katy Perry fans to go knock on doors in groups than it is to get a bunch of people who actually have jobs and families and lives. And then by and large, the biggest obstacle to conservative success is that we actually do